Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are going on an absolutely mind-bending journey. We're going to be peeling the onion on the source material to bridge ancient history, esoteric symbolism, and cutting-edge psychoacoustic physics. Our goal? To uncover a profound mystery about human history and architecture. Seriously, we are going to explore a topic that will completely reshape how you understand the buildings of the ancient world, layer by fascinating layer. So, let's dive right in.
Now, it's a pretty wild question to ask, right? What if ancient temples were actually psychoacoustic technology designed to literally hack the human brain? It sounds like science fiction. But before we can dive into that deep esoteric rabbit hole and get to the hard science, we really need to ground ourselves. We have to start with the foundational layer of historical facts, just to establish exactly what was happening culturally when these ideas first started spreading like wildfire. Section 1. History, Myth, and Rebellion.
To truly grasp the cultural rebellion of early Christianity, we first have to look at the historical consensus. Mainstream historians, both secular and Christian, pretty much universally agree that Jesus was a real historical figure who was executed around 30 to 33 CE. We have solid, well-documented writings from Jewish historians like Flavius Josephus around 93 CE, and Roman historians like Tacitus in 116 CE. Now, this is absolutely crucial because it completely debunks the alternative Roman state myth hypothesis, which is this idea that the empire just fabricated the whole religion for social control. The timeline simply doesn't support that at all. This was a grassroots underground movement way before the state ever got its hands on it.
And this brilliantly illustrates a massive sociological shift. Think about the Greco-Roman world for a second. It was all about honor, power, military victory, and absolute civic domination. It was brutal. Early Christianity introduced a radical counterculture that was in direct opposition to all of that. They taught turning the other cheek, loving your enemies, and exalting the meek. So rather than being some top-down tool to control the masses, this was a stunning ethical inversion. It fundamentally challenged the ruthless socio-economic hierarchy of Rome by offering unprecedented dignity to the disenfranchised and the powerless.
Which brings us to this fascinating archetype of the era, the holy fool, or selos. This is someone who feigns madness or adopts completely socially unacceptable behavior, specifically to unmask the hypocrisy of polite society. By totally abandoning the rational calculus of power and status, the holy fool perfectly encapsulated the early Christian rebellion against worldly power structures. They pointed instead toward a transcendent reality. Think of it as the ultimate form of ancient societal protest. They were essentially proving that the rigid rules of the empire were completely artificial.
All right, Section 2, the geometry of the cross.
Okay, there is a mathematical curiosity hidden in plain sight here that we have to talk about. A standard Latin cross is actually the two-dimensional unfolded net of a three-dimensional cube. Let that sink in. A cube has 6 square faces, 12 edges, and 8 vertices. When you take a cube and literally unfold it along 7 of its edges, it lies perfectly flat on the ground as a cross. Now, in esoteric traditions throughout antiquity, the 3D cube represents the material world. It is the ultimate symbol of physical containment, rigid boundaries, and fixed spatial dimensions.
Now, to get why that geometric symbol matters so much, we need to look at ancient Gnosticism, which, remarkably, parallels our modern simulation hypothesis. Gnostics believed the material universe was a false reality. They saw it as a prison created by an ignorant demiurge and guarded by entities called archons, all designed to keep the divine spark trapped inside human consciousness. It was, effectively, an ancient way of describing a simulated reality. The reason this matters to us is that it shows our ancestors were wrestling with the exact same existential, matrix-like concepts that we debate in the tech world today.
So, the really crucial point here is what happens when you combine these two ideas. If the cube represents the architectural bounds of this material simulation, well, unfolding that cube into a 2D cross represents breaking out of the physical dimensional matrix. The cross basically becomes a cosmic key. It's a symbolic mechanism for breaching the 3D trap and creating an exit vector entirely out of linear space-time. It is just a brilliant, mind-bending concept that transforms a simple shape into a literal map for escaping reality itself.
Let's move on to Section 3, Sacred Numbers and Architecture.
Number 20. According to the ancient texts, Solomon's Holy of Holies, which was the inner sanctuary where the divine presence supposedly dwelled, was built as a perfect cube. It measured precisely 20 by 20 by 20 royal cubits. This represents total absolute symmetry. You see, for ancient builders, achieving perfect symmetry wasn't just some aesthetic choice. It was the literal manifestation of divine perfection on Earth. The physical world was messy and chaotic, but a perfect cube? That was mathematically flawless.
Next up, 144. You'll see this number popping up constantly as a symbol of cosmic scale and structural completion.
We see it heavily in visionary texts, like the descriptions of the New Jerusalem. It's described as this colossal, glowing hyperstructure, with walls measuring exactly 144 cubits, which, by the way, is precisely 12 times 12. It represents the ultimate fulfillment of divine architecture, scaled all the way up to a universal level.
And then there's 153. In the Gospel of John, the disciples haul in a net containing exactly 153 fish. Now, beyond just being a suspiciously specific tally, ancient mathematicians recognized 153 as a triangular number. It's the sum of all whole numbers from 1 through 17. It also holds a specific geometric property related to the vesica Piscis, that is the almond-shaped overlap you get when two equal circles intersect, which mathematically represented a bridge or a portal between two entirely different realms.
So, let's take a look at the exact dimensions of Solomon's temple based on the historical records found in 1 Kings 6. If we use a standard conversion of roughly 1.5 feet per royal cubit, the main hall was 60 by 20 by 30 cubits, and the Holy of Holies, like we just noted, was a perfect 20 by 20 by 20 cube. Now keep these exact proportions locked in your memory, because they're about to set up a physics calculation that changes literally everything.
Section 4. The Acoustics of Awe. Okay, we are going to transform these ancient architectural dimensions into hard, undeniable acoustic physics. When you look at the physics of room acoustics, a fascinating rule emerges. The physical dimensions of any rectangular room perfectly dictate the frequencies of sound that will naturally resonate and amplify within that space. It's dictated by a formula, where frequency equals the speed of sound divided by twice the room dimension. Ultimately, this means a building isn't just a shelter, its geometry acts as a literal, massive tuning fork.
When you plug the exact dimensions of Solomon's temple into that formula, the acoustic profile that drops out is just staggering. The perfect 30-foot cube of the Holy of Holies creates this massive, overlapping standing wave at exactly 18.75 hertz. That is deep infrasound, resting right on the absolute edge of human hearing. The main hall's length creates a sub-bass frequency of 6.25 hertz, and its width? That creates another 18.75 hertz wave, building a continuous acoustic bridge between the two rooms. Just imagine standing in a solid stone structure completely filled with an enveloping, visceral blanket of deep, bodily infrasound vibrating right up through the floorboards.
And it gets crazier, because that 27,000 cubic foot stone cube of the Holy of Holies was coupled to the larger main hall through a single doorway, so it acted as a Helmholtz resonator. Think of that deep hum you hear when you blow across the top of a glass bottle, but scaled up to the size of an entire building. If priests were chanting or blowing ceremonial horns out in the main hall, it would cause this massive stone cavity to ring sympathetically at bone-rattling frequencies. The entire temple was quite literally an instrument.
Finally, Section 5. Architecture as Neural Technology.
This is where the ancient world meets modern neuroscience, and it is mind-blowing. The acoustic standing waves of the temple overlap perfectly with human brainwave states. The 6.25 hertz wave of the main hall directly matches the human theta brainwave state, which operates right between 4 and 8 hertz. Meanwhile, the 18.75 hertz wave of the Holy of Holies sits exactly on the critical boundary between alpha and beta brainwaves. Do you see what's happening? The temple's structural acoustic standing waves perfectly align with extremely low frequency, or ELF, human brainwave states.
Let's break down this convergence, because the biological implications here are huge. Standing in the main hall creates what we can call a theta bridge. The 6.25 hertz acoustic vibrations mechanically stimulate the body to match deep meditative hypogogic brainwaves. And it's also incredibly close to the 7.83 hertz Schumann resonance, which is the natural electromagnetic heartbeat of the Earth. Meanwhile, moving toward the inner sanctum exposes you to the 18.75 hertz cubic stress test. This is an acoustic pressure known to stimulate the vestibular system in your inner ear, inducing a visceral sense of physical awe and highly acute focus.
All of this triggers a well-documented biological phenomenon called neural entrainment. This is when the brain's electrical rhythms actually synchronize with external resonant inputs. Think of it kind of like matching the swing of a pendulum. If you introduce a strong rhythmic vibration, the brain will naturally adjust its own electrical pulses to match that rhythm. The temple essentially acted as a massive acoustic amplifier. By mechanically vibrating the skull and chest cavity at these exact frequencies, the architecture itself could literally drive occupants out of their normal waking beta states, forcing them into deep visionary theta trances. The building was tuning the minds of the people inside it.
Which leaves us with a really powerful, lingering question. If these ancient geometric dimensions so perfectly hack our neural entrainment, Well, how much did ancient architects truly understand about human bioelectricity? Did they just stumble upon these mind-altering frequencies entirely by accident? Or were they intentionally building highly advanced consciousness technology out of stone? It completely changes the way you look at the ancient world for sure. Keep asking questions, and I'll see you in the next explainer.